Hi, how are you? I hope you are doing great. My name is Maria Pawlicka and I'm here to tell you all about myths, lores, urban legends and all things supernatural. If this sounds interesting, feel free to subscribe. Today I'm going to start our meeting by telling you a story. In a small village in Musashi province lived two woodcutters, Mosaku and Minokichi. Mosaku was an old man and Minokichi, his student, was only 18. Every day they went together to the forest to bring some wood to the village, and when they were going to the woods, they had to cross the river. There was a bridge, but this bridge was often ruined due to the floods. So there was also a ferry, and Minokichi and Mosaku often used this ferry. One very cold evening, Mosaku and Minokichi were heading home when the snowstorm struck. They managed to reach the ferry, but the ferryman wasn't there and the ferry was on the other side of the river. It was, of course, too cold to swim, so two guys decided to look for a shelter. They looked around and they found ferryman's hut, so they decided to stay there. They thought to be lucky because they found a shelter, but the hut was small and there was no windows, no place for fire, there was only a floor and a door. Mosaku and Minokichi closed the door and they laid on the floor. They covered themselves with their raincoats and they tried to fall asleep. Mosaku didn't have any problems, he almost immediately fell asleep, but Minokichi stayed awake for long. Minokichi listened to the snowstorm and the wind and he hoped that the weather would soon be better. Unfortunately, it was getting even colder and Minokichi was shaking under his pullover, but finally he managed to fall asleep. He was soon awakened though when the snow hit his face. The door to the hut was open and in the snowlight he saw a woman inside the hut. A woman was dressed all in white. She was bending over Mosaku and she was blowing air at him. Her breath looked like bright white smoke. She turned to Minokichi and she bent over him also. He tried to scream or say something, but he couldn't. The white lady looked at him and she got even closer. Their faces were almost touching. Minokichi, despite his terror, noticed that this lady was really beautiful, but her eyes were terrifying. She watched him for a moment and then she smiled and said, "I wanted to kill you too, but you are young and kinda cute, so I won't hurt you. But if you ever tell somebody a story about our meeting, I will find you and I will kill you." Then she went out the door and she vanished in the snow. Minokichi wasn't sure if he wasn't dreaming, so he went and tried to wake up his master. But sadly, he quickly realized that his master is super cold and also super dead. We don't know what Minokichi did for the rest of the night, but he probably fell asleep due to cold. In the morning, the ferryman came to his hut and he found Mosaku dead and Minokichi unconscious. He called for help and Minokichi was soon brought back to his senses. Minokichi was ill for a long time because he was exposed to coldness, but finally he managed to recover. He was frightened by the events of that night, but he wasn't even sure if the white lady was real or she was his dream, but he kept quiet just in case. Finally, he managed to come back to work and he was going to woods every day. Then he was coming back and he was selling the wood with his mother. About a year after the strange events, when Minokichi was returning home, he met a pretty girl on his way. The girl was walking in the same direction, so they walked together. The girl was hot, she was tall, she was slim, she had long black hair and she had really fair complexion. They started chatting and the girl said that her name was Yuki and she's walking to the nearest city to find a job. She recently lost her parents and she was hoping that in the city she would find some job as a servant. Minokichi wasn't really interested in that, so he asked her if she's married or engaged. So he was like these guys on Instagram who write to you and ask if you are married. She giggled and she told him that she isn't married or engaged, and then she asked him if he was. Minokichi told her that he didn't have anybody yet because he's kinda young and he also had a widowed mother to care for. Then they went quiet for a little bit, but when they were reaching Minokichi's village, they were quite familiar with each other and they didn't want to part ways yet. Minokichi asked Oyuki to crash at his place. It took some convincing, but finally Oyuki agreed. Surprisingly, Minokichi's mom loved Oyuki and she even prepared a meal for her. The mom fancied her so much that she persuaded her to delay her journey to the city. As it is in tales, Oyuki never made to the city, but she stayed with Minokichi and she played the role of the best daughter-in-law ever. Minokichi's mom loved her so much that even when she was dying, she was still talking about Oyuki and how cool she was. Minokichi and Oyuki got busy and they had 10 kids together. Oyuki was quite liked in the village, but it was hard not to notice that she didn't seem to age. She was as hot and beautiful as the first day she met Minokichi, and after all these years and pregnancies, she wasn't supposed to look that way. One night, when the kids finally went to sleep, Oyuki was sewing by the light of the lamp, and Minokichi was staring at her. He said that seeing her like that reminded him of a strange event that happened when he was only 18. Then he proceeded to tell her that it was the first time when he saw someone as beautiful as Oyuki. So Oyuki was like, "Really? Tell me all about her," which was a trap, but... So he told her all about that night, about the white lady who killed Mosaku but spared his life. Then he said that even though he was really afraid that night, he wasn't sure if this lady was real. Oyuki threw away her sewing and she started screaming at her husband. "It was me and I told you not to tell anybody and I would love to kill you, but the kids are asleep, so I won't. But if you hurt this kid, I will find you and fucking kill you." Then she disappeared and never was seen again. That was the most popular story about Yukionna, a snow woman who is sometimes considered a kind of yokai. The legend was written down by Hearn Lafcadio, but it isn't the only version. In reality, researchers believe that Lafcadio added a lot to this story to make it more engaging. Usually, Yukionna doesn't do that much. If she marries someone, it's short-lived, not 10 pregnancies long. It's worth mentioning that the stories about the relationship between a man and supernatural creature aren't uncommon in Japanese mythology. And honestly, it doesn't even matter if Lafcadio Hearn exaggerated a little bit or a lot. There is no one true version of the myth. They are always changing and evolving, and we are here to enjoy the ride. But before we check out what other sources have to say about Yukionna, let's dissect her name. So we can divide it into Yuki and Onna. And as you probably guessed, Yuki means snow and Onna means woman. So we got snow woman. So Yukionna is a snow woman, but she's not a yeti, and in some regions she's called differently. For example, she can be called Yuki Musume, daughter of the snow, Yuki Jiro, snow woman, Yuki Anise, snow sister, Yuki Onba, snow granny, Yuki Inba, snow hag, Yuki Furibaba, snowfall witch, Yuki Onaga, snow girl. You got the drill, it's always a snow and some variation of the word lady. Yukionna is old, like 14th century old. One of the first mentions about Yukionna appeared in Sogi Shokoku Monogatari, and the author of this book, Sogi, claimed that he saw this being once. It's believed that in some places Yukionna came to men and she would become their dream wife. But the marriage would be short-lived because Yukionna would refuse to take a bath. When she's finally made to do that, she will disappear and she will leave behind her some icicles. In other stories, Yukionna visits old couples and she asks them to let her warm herself up near the fire. Then she wants to go out, and when somebody tries to stop her, she would disappear. Sometimes Yukionna appears during snowstorms and she's carrying with her a baby, Yukinko, and you probably guessed it means snow child. Yukionna would ask people to hold this baby, and when they take this baby, it starts getting heavier and heavier until the person that holds this baby is covered in snow and freeze to death. But if you refuse to take the baby, Yukionna would push you down the snowy valley. But there was the one story about a warrior who managed to win with Yukionna and her snow child. When Yukionna asked the warrior to hold the child, he agreed, but he took out a small sword and he kept this small sword near his mouth. And when he took the child's head was near this sword. Apparently it stopped the child from getting heavier, and when the warrior gave back the child to Yukionna, she was very happy and she rewarded him with a lot of jewels. It's also believed that those who managed to withstand the weight of Yukinko would gain a great physical strength. Sometimes Yukionna would go to the village and ask for water and ice. If you splash her with cold water, she would grow bigger, but if you splash her with hot water, she would disappear. Yukionna is also accused of stealing kids, so during snowy days, some parents would keep their children inside. There's also an interesting belief that would make Yukionna a Japanese vampire. So in Iwate and Miyagi prefectures, there is a belief that Yukionna steals humans' life force. Apparently she also likes to take livers out of the children and freeze people to death. I don't know what she does with these livers, but I think she eats them. In Nishimonai, people believe that if you look at Yukionna's face and talk to her, she will eat you. On the other hand, it's widely believed that if you don't answer Yukionna when she's talking to you, she would push you down to the bottom of the valley. So you will probably end up dead anyway. In Ibigawa there is an invisible monster, and when this monster sometimes is visible, it appears as Yukionna. So this monster goes to houses and it asks for water. But if you give them water, it will kill you, so you are supposed to give them a cup of hot tea. Sometimes Yukionna is actually nice, and if you are polite to her, she may turn into gold in the morning. At winter, it's believed that gods pay visit to humans, and if you are not respectful towards them, they will make you regret it. In some stories, Yukionna is kind to the people who are nice to her, but she's cruel to the ones who were rude to her. So one night, Yukionna visited a woodcutter who was greedy. She knocked on his door and she asked him if she could stay for the night because it was really cold. The woodcutter refused and he closed the door. Yukionna broke the door down and then she froze everything, including woodcutter himself. The same night she visited other woodcutter, and this woodcutter was nice. He let her in and he even made her some soup. Then he led her to fire and he took her hand and tried to warm her up. Yukionna was so moved by that she cried and disappeared. But in the woodcutter's village no one ever froze to death, and people believe that it was due to woodcutter's hospitality, and because of his kindness, Yukionna gave them her blessing. Who is Yukionna? Her true identity is unknown, but there are many speculations. Sometimes it's said that she's a ghost of a woman who died during snowstorm. There may be something to the story because Yukionna is usually described as floating and she has no feet, and in Japanese belief, a creature without feet is usually a ghost. Some say that Yukionna was born from the snow, and this theory is based on the belief that if there is a lot of something, then something living would come from it. This is actually quite accurate if we take into consideration Japanese mythology, where all existing things have, and even processes, have some god that takes care of them. In some version, Yukionna is a princess that once lived on the moon. She was really bored, so she decided to go to Earth. She fell down on Earth with the snow, and then she realized that she couldn't come back. So every winter night when there is moon visible, she's trying to come back home. How can we recognize her? It's not hard because she's always super pale, like snow white pale. She has also really beautiful long black hair and blue lips, but her eyes are inhuman and scary. Sometimes she's dressed in white, but in other accounts she's described as naked, but she's so white that we can only see her face on the snow. In some descriptions she has no feet and she leaves no footprints. When she feels threatened, she could turn into mist or snow. Yukionna seems to be more aggressive towards men, but it doesn't mean that women are not in danger, especially when it's snowy. To fight Yukionna, we have to identify which one we are dealing with. So let's break down the lore and define the main varieties of Yukionna. First is the water beggar, and she's the one that would come to you and ask for water. So here the solution is simple, just splash her with hot water and she would disappear. The second one is a moon princess, and she's rather harmless, so if you meet her, maybe just tell her about the moon landing. The third kind is the most dangerous in my opinion. She's a snow vampire that's draining life energy from the victims. She also loves to eat children. The best way to avoid her is just to stay away from the forests and mountains during winter. Sometimes she lures men with her appearance and then she kills them during the intercourse. How do you recognize her? She will be the wildest roaming in the wilderness. But she may also break into homes, although in some lores she has to be invited first. So don't invite super pale ladies to your house in Japan. How to deal with her? Well, run and scream. You may also try this trick with hot water, it shouldn't hurt. Maybe it even will slow her down a little bit. It's not like you have anything to lose, because once you are on her radar, she will find you and she will kill you. The fourth kind is the talker. Talk to her and she will kill you. Don't talk to her and she will kill you anyway, so just run. There is the fifth kind, the one with child, and this one will ask you to hold the baby. So if you have to hold the baby, you should try the warrior's trick. So hold a knife or a sword near the baby's head, and if you are lucky, you may even get rewarded. And the final one is the one that marries you, and this one is tricky. Just don't tell her about the strange lady that you once met during the snowy night, and you will be fine. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me. What do you think about Yukionna? Does she seem scary? I wouldn't want to meet her during snowy night, but due to the global warming, she may be an endangered species now. So maybe it's the last chance to spot Yukionna in wilderness. Anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. I have also started a podcast on Spotify and other platforms, so you may check this out. Have a nice day and bye!